Hello everyone, Sidewin here. Today I'm going to be talking about the Ancestors Oracle in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The best way to explain the Oracle class is essentially a divine caster that takes power from divine energy, but experiences blowback for not following the proper channels. The Ancestors Oracle is the version of the class that draws upon the spirits of ancestors, whether helpful or harmful. So the overview of this video is I'll start with the basics of the class, as I always do, with attribute modifier skills and any proficiencies. Then, because this is a caster class, I'll move on to the spellcasting. I'll finish this video by talking about the Oracle's Curse, which is the core special thing about the Oracle, which has both benefits and drawbacks. So the basic abilities of the Oracle. First off, the key attribute is Charisma. In this case, that's representing a sort of force of personality more so than a fast talker, but the two do not have to be exclusive. And the Oracle is proficient in light armor and simple weapons, so that means it's not really a melee damage dealer unless you choose a different subclass. And it is an expert in will, meaning it has a very high bonus to those saves, while it is only trained in the other two major saves. So that makes the Oracle somewhat vulnerable to physical attacks and indicates that it's probably not a melee class and should probably stay farther back. The skills granted by the class is, first off, you have Religion, which is granted by the Oracle class. Then the Ancestors Oracle has the Society skill granted by their Mystery, that is Ancestors. And finally, on top of that, you get free plus Intelligence modifier additional skills. So this indicates that the Oracle can be an effective secondary recall knowledge if you invest in intelligence or wisdom, and you could also always pick up medicine or some other skill to provide additional utility. And because of the number of skills, you have a fair bit of flexibility in how many different ones you take. If you wanted, with only a little bit of investment in intelligence, you could have every major recall knowledge skill, with the addition of Society, which is used for humanoids. So on to spellcasting. The Oracle is a spontaneous caster. I apologize for the slide, it just cut. So the Oracle is a spontaneous spellcaster, which has known spells and spell slots. The way this works is every time you level up, you learn a certain number of spells, which you know, and then you can cast them in your available slots. So at first level, the Oracle has 5 known cantrips. This number generally doesn't increase without taking feats, and 2 known first level spells. At the same time, it has free first level slots. So that means you know 2 different spells. For instance, you could know Magic Weapon and Heal, and you have 3 different slots. So you get to cast one of those either 1, 2, or 3 times, and the other one filling the rest of the slots. You can choose at the time of casting as a spontaneous spellcaster, giving more flexibility in the moment. However, it does limit the number of spells you can use in a certain day, which can be a disadvantage depending on your situation. Then, because of your Ancestors' Mystery, you gain 2 additional granted spells on top of the known spells. Firstly, you get the Guidance cantrip, which gives you a +1 status bonus to 1 roll before the end of the spell's duration. It takes 1 action to cast and basically just gives a little bonus. It is not a super powerful spell, but it can be useful in the right moments because a +1 does give the +5% chance to succeed and +5% chance to critically succeed. The second granted spell is Ill Omen, which is a first level spell. This means you know free first level spells and have free first level slots, so you could technically cast each one in a day if you wanted. The way that Ill Omen works is you cast it on an enemy and force the target to roll twice and take the worst roll once after the casting of the spell. If they fail farther than just a failure, this number will extend, but by default, it's only the first roll. Additionally, as a spellcaster, the Oracle has a Revelation spell, which is their version of focus spells. Just like every other focus spell, you have a pool of focus points, starting with 1 at level 1, and you can gain additional ones at higher levels. You can regain these points outside of combat by using the refocus action, as with every other caster. I'll be talking a bit more about that action when I go into how the curse works, because there's certain rules interactions. So the Oracle's first level revelation spell is Ancestral Touch. This is a one action spell, which works by using a touch. So that means you must be able to reach out and physically touch the enemy to use the spell. And it then forces a will save on the target. This means that mindless creatures are immune, which does somewhat limit the applicability of the ability. Then, so long as the enemy does not critically succeed on their save, you deal damage. On a success for the enemy, you deal half damage. On a failure, you deal full damage. And on a critical failure, you deal double damage. This is pretty standard. But there's a second rider condition which is imposed on a failure or a critical failure. That is the frightened condition. So on a failure, they are frightened 1. On a critical failure, they're frightened 2. And this is a simple debuff condition that can also be caused by many other abilities. But because this is an infinite use spell, you can pretty much use it each combat to give a bonus to hit one of the enemies. And since mindless enemies very frequently have a non-mindless commander, this could be how you use the spell. So I'm going to finish by talking about how the curse works. This is really the core mechanic of the Oracle class, which is unique as opposed to other spellcasters. First off, you need to understand the condition Cursebound. This is an ability which is imposed by using your curse abilities. It gives you a +1 to the condition whenever you use a Cursebound ability. Most of these abilities are feats. There might be some spells which impose it, but the vast majority are feats you gain. So at lower levels, you have a maximum value of 2 with your Cursebound condition, meaning you can only use your curse abilities twice before you have to reduce it. And you can reduce this detrimental condition by using the refocus action. You regain your focus point and reduce the condition at the same time, which means that you're somewhat incentivized to increase your Cursebound ability, even though it does then apply penalties. Additionally, one note here before you start thinking up clever ways to get around the Cursebound condition is that the rules explicitly prohibit it. It is specifically saying you cannot reduce the consequences of your curse by using other abilities. For instance, you can't use a spell to remove the condition imposed by your curse. You still have it, and you might have just spent a spell slot and not gained anything. So in the case of the Ancestor Oracle, your curse is the Curse of Ancestral Meddling. Basically, the flavor is your ancestral spirits are either trying to help you and not being very helpful, or punishing you for playing with divine power beyond what you probably should be. The way that it works is every time your Cursebound condition increases by 1, you also have the Clumsy condition increase by 1. The Clumsy condition applies a penalty to Dexterity, AC, and any checks using the ability. So this does slightly incentivize not focusing on Dexterity-based abilities, such as Acrobatics or Thievery, because very frequently you're going to be having a minus to these abilities. The way that you gain this condition as the Ancestor Oracle is you have access to the Whispers of Weakness feat. This is a one-action ability which lets you instantly learn the target's weaknesses and lowest save. So this basically lets you skip the recall knowledge check to get the same benefit. Additionally, you gain a +2 status bonus to your next attack versus the target, or your next hostile skill check targeting it. So for instance, if you're trying to attack it, you gain it, or if you're trying to use an athletics action. There are some other abilities which can interact with it, but the main ones are attacks and athletics actions. Admittedly, this does kind of steer you to having an option for melee, because at the same time you're going to have a penalty to any dexterity attacks, but it's also putting you in melee, so that is a cost-benefit analysis which will depend on the circumstance. After you use the ability once, the target becomes immune for 1 day. So the way you can use this is you can use it to either target your detrimental effects on the target. You could use it to tell your allies how best to exploit damage types. or you could, at the same time, gain a bonus to attack. So it's essentially a support ability, which also benefits you. That is the summary of the Ancestors Oracle at level 1. That is all for today. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful.